They didn't lock me out. Not at first. That's what made it so eerie how polite the betrayal was. My calendar slowly emptied over the week. Stand-ups, rescheduled planning calls, moved to director review only. At first, I thought it was a reshuffle, a new sprint format, a shift in roles. But then I noticed the permissions change read only on my own architecture folders. I filed a ticket knowing it wouldn't get fixed. It wasn't a bug, it was foreshadowing. Idris stopped by my desk on Thursday with a grin so careful it felt like a sticker. He asked if I needed help transferring documentation for the handoff. I blinked at him. What handoff, I asked. He smiled again, like maybe I was playing dumb. Just making sure we're aligned ahead of the transition, he said, voice smooth, palms open. You've made the ramp so effortless. The ramp. Not my ramp up. Someone else's. That afternoon, I left for coffee early. I needed air, something non-recycled. On the way back up, I stepped into the elevator behind a design intern holding a glossy printout, a stakeholder deck for Friday's demo. I saw the layout before she flipped it closed. My architecture diagram. Angular, color-coded, annotated with performance flow. My handwriting gone, my name gone. And in its place, lead Marcus Brell. Marcus was in marketing. I rode 3 more floors past my own just to breathe. When I got back to my desk, I opened the latest repo pull logs. Someone had mirrored my original commit. Different repo name, same bones. I traced the change logs backwards. Someone scrubbed the metadata tags. The commit history looked clean, sterile, but I could still feel the fingerprints. My keycard still worked. My email didn't bounce. No one had said anything official. But the message was there in the invisible layers of protocol in the bright green check marks next to someone else's credentials. I sat back staring at the screen. I should have felt panic, but what came instead was a quiet confirmation. They thought they could launch it without me, and maybe they could, but they'd forgotten something. Something I'd buried 2.5 years ago just in case. The balloons were already up when I arrived, silver ones spelling out LAUNCH. Someone had taped a banner crookedly over the whiteboard, Q2 push 0 waste full speed. There were cupcakes on the kitchenette table, a Spotify playlist buzzing in the background, and voices louder than usual, relieved, celebratory, just forced enough to sting. I wasn't invited, but I wasn't not invited. I hovered near the edge of the kitchen, pouring stale coffee like a guest at her own funeral. No one made eye contact, but a few nodded tight-lipped. Marcus gave me a thumbs up across the room like he'd just remembered I was still here. I carried the coffee down to the sub-level where the server hallway stayed cold year-round. I sat on the bench near the access door, my usual escape hatch. No one looked there. No one thought to keep it secret. That's where I heard them. 3 execs in tailored soft shells, 1 junior dev, Camilo, still wearing his onboarding badge. I knew Camilo. I'd trained him. He used to ask thoughtful questions. Now he stood quietly as one VP spoke. Just reuse her schema. It's modular, right? No need to rebuild anything. Just change the repo name. Strip her tags. Someone else chimed in. She's still technically in the system. Be discreet. Scrub the logs before Monday. Camilo didn't speak, just nodded, face tight. They passed by without looking. I could have reached out, said something. I didn't. I waited 5 more minutes before returning upstairs. At my desk, I opened my laptop. Slack logged out. Credentials invalid. When I tried again, it said the user didn't exist. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone. But when I opened the local console, the framework spun to life. Gaudium core. My baby was still running. The heartbeat script ticked along invisible beneath their shiny layers. They'd erased me from the story, but they didn't understand the engine. They'd kept the machine unaware that it answered only to the one who wrote its soul. I leaned back, clicked open the file labeled decayhandler.py, and reread the header I'd written over 2 years ago. Section 4.2, license expires upon removal of original architect. I wrote the first version of the engine on a fold-out table in my mother's guest room. She was asleep in the next room, barely breathing. Hospice nurses rotated in 12-hour shifts, and I kept the window cracked for air I never noticed. It was week 4 of my divorce hearings. The last document I signed that day was the custody transfer of a dog neither of us really wanted. The next thing I signed was the first commit message initial logic tree build v0.1. I used my personal Git repo. There was no company yet, no vision deck, just loops and functions that didn't break when everything else did. The structure wasn't clean, not yet, but it was fast, responsive, recursive in a way most engineers wouldn't dare attempt without mapping out every exit condition. I didn't have the time for whiteboarding. I had a mother dying and a partner erasing me one asset at a time. So I built something I could trust, something that would answer when no one else did. I still remember the line that made the engine work, a conditional fallback nested inside a logic gate that didn't exist in our framework yet. I had to write it raw. I still hear the click of the keys, still see the stain from the wine I spilled across the second monitor when the voicemail from the hospital came through. I didn't pick up. I just kept coding. By morning, I had a prototype. By the end of the month, I had a working AI core that could simulate insight chains with less than 0.3 seconds latency. When we pitched it to the early investors, Idris called it synthetic intuition. But that's not what it was. It was grief, formatted and compiled, the logic of letting go coded into survival. And somewhere deep inside, buried beneath the silent failbacks and the recursive control scripts, I left a note, a legal one, a boundary wrapped in logic, just in case someone ever forgot what it cost to build. I never told them where it lived. I never had to, because the only way to remove it was to remove me. I never labeled it something dramatic, just a quiet clause tucked deep into a fallback module no one had touched in 18 months. The file name was forgettable. The logic looked archaic, and the docstring header read like a deprecated handler exactly as intended. The truth was, I didn't trust them even then. Not out of paranoia, but memory. Startups move fast, and when things scale, so do egos. So do justifications. I'd seen it before code handed over authorship erased original devs swept aside with a gift basket and an expired email. So I wrote section 4.2. It wasn't just a comment, it was a conditional tied to my employee ID, not for access, for validation. The system's license heartbeat checked my identity every 30 days quietly without logging and allowed core services to continue running. If it failed 3 times in a row, the system wouldn't crash. It would decay. Slowly, gracefully, but irreversibly. They never found it because no one looked where things just worked. That's the first rule of fast tech: don't touch legacy if it hasn't exploded yet. I reread the logic again now. It was still intact. The last check was triggered 2 days ago. Next scheduled ping, Friday midnight. My employment termination hadn't officially processed yet, but my credentials were already stripped from every user-accessible system, which meant the next validation cycle would fail, and then the next. They thought I was out, that I'd walked, that I was just another burned-out engineer who couldn't scale with the vision. But the vision was mine. I closed the file, ran a shadow check from a local sandbox, and watched the simulated countdown begin. There was nothing dramatic, no alarms, no errors. Just a whisper in the logs, a pulse, waiting to be missed. I hadn't built it to break things. I built it so no one could build without me. They wanted me gone. That part was clear, but they didn't understand what I'd woven in. Not yet. And by the time they did, the system would already be counting down to silence. At 11:57 p.m., I opened the balcony door wide. The city air had that sticky pre-storm heaviness, the kind that makes concrete sweat. I set my phone face down on the table, uncorked the wine, and waited. They'd spent all week hyping the launch, posts scheduled, interviews lined up. An embargoed TechCrunch article already in the hands of a reporter who'd once called me sharp but unmarketable. They were ready to show the world the future of insight automation, except the future still ran on my license. At 12:00 a.m. sharp, my phone buzzed once, then again, then 10 times, in under a minute. I let it lie there, a little black mirror blinking beneath the skyline. By 12 a message finally broke through Do Not Disturb Marcus work system. Not loading, you have keys still, I didn't respond. Then, Camilo, did you do anything weird with the deployment permissions I poured the wine? At 12:05, a call from an unknown number, no voicemail, followed by a text, license expired, contact owner to renew. No header, no support link, just the raw interface error I'd hard-coded 2 years ago with lowercase letters and no apology. I brought the glass to my lips and took the first sip. It tasted like silence earned. The skyline flickered. Maybe it was just the building across the street switching power modes, or maybe it was something smaller, a ripple, a glitch at scale. The beginning of absence moving through their product, slow but irreversible. I refreshed my private dashboard, one of the only instances still mapped to the legacy port. Red indicators rolled in like Tidewater service delays, key mismatches, back-end failures. No alarms, nothing flashy. Just absence where answers used to live. By 12:18, a Slack message from someone named Harper. I remembered her, the one who voted to restructure me for scale. Her message was short. Please, it's launch night. Don't do this. But I wasn't doing anything. Not now. I set the phone down, looked at the skyline again, and thought how fitting it was that the system was finally running exactly as I designed it. At 12:43 a.m., the first public post went live, a screenshot from a beta user showing a loading screen frozen on retrieving contextual insight. The caption read, "So this is the future." By 12:50, the post had over 20,000 impressions. A TikTok video followed someone tapping furiously on the app interface, then cutting to a clip of a fax machine spitting blank pages. I watched the numbers climb in real time like heat rising. Then they did what I knew they'd do. At 1:04 a.m., they pushed a hotfix, no rollback check, no dependency diff, no QA flags. They bypassed the sandbox and went live. At 1:06, their system buckled. I refreshed the endpoint feed. Errors bloomed like mold, 503s, 502s, malformed calls, license verification cascades. A backup instance tried to spin up, but the validation keys were stale. The core container, my original build, had a recursive guard against forced injection. Every push without correct handshake triggered a silent log and a throttle sequence. They hit that threshold in under 60 seconds. Their API provider flagged the abuse and cut the pipeline. Then the dashboard went public. Some intern, probably trying to impress someone 2 rungs up, had set the main status panel to transparent mode during beta week. They forgot to turn it off. Now the world could see it. Red banners call failures per second, climbing into the hundreds of thousands. And in the corner, a tiny footer they forgot to scrub framework adapted from original architecture. By S-Win, I didn't post anything right away. I just uploaded a Git commit, time-stamped, labeled license terms original v2.0 inside my original clause. Section 4.2, a Slack export, messages about authorship, suggestions to scrub credits, and a single line. This system expires without me. That was never a bug. By 2/12, it had been shared on 5 subreddits, 3 Discord servers, and Hacker News. By 2:30, someone tweeted, "They fired the architect and wondered why the house collapsed." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. They'd made all the noise they needed. I just built the echo. The first time Tara ever spoke to me, she called me Miss Win. I told her not to formality was poison in tech, but she kept it anyway like armor. She was fresh out of a boot camp jittery with ambition, always scribbling notes in the margins of my whiteboard sketches. I stayed late with her the first week, walked her through a recursive merge conflict she couldn't untangle. She'd cried when it resolved. Now she was crying again, but for very different reasons. Her voice cracked through the phone, thin and unmoored. I didn't know, I swear. They said you transitioned out months ago. They said the engine was collaborative. I didn't speak. Let her fill the silence. They said you didn't leave full documentation, just loose files. I tried to follow. I really tried. I thought I was doing it right. The code had outpaced her. Not because she was unskilled, but because she didn't understand the story underneath it. You can't wear another person's logic like a coat and expect it to warm you the same way. I just ran the patch they gave me. I didn't know the license was still active. Her voice collapsed into a whisper. They're saying it's my fault. That part I believed. I opened the shared Slack thread I'd archived before my account was shut down. A message from Idris timestamped 2 weeks after I was cut loose. Tara will take over where Sarika left off. Be sure to clean the repo before the audit. I copied it into my folder. Another entry. I opened a new message. Typed slowly, deliberately. If you never read the documentation, you never own the system. I hit send. Her reply didn't come right away. Just 3 blinking dots. Then nothing. Then I looked up to you. I really did. I thought if I did the job well enough, I'd earn what you built. And then the part that stuck. But I didn't build it. I just wore your skin and prayed no one looked too closely. I highlighted that line. Filed it. Proof that even borrowed ghosts eventually learn the weight of the bones they inhabit. I didn't reply. Instead, I exported the logs and kept watching the counter tick. Byron Haltrick didn't shake hands. He just nodded, slid into the booth across from me, and dropped his phone onto the table like it owed him answers. The cafe was quiet, neutral territory, but his voice cut through it like a ledger line. I put 15 million into them, he said, and now I've got 3 burner emails from reporters asking if I back fraud. I sipped my coffee. Let him steam. He tapped his phone. Is it true I slid my laptop forward, opened the demo? You tell me. 5 minutes. That's all it took. The side-by-side code, diff, the expired token chain, the repo logs. I didn't editorialize, just walked him through the architecture they'd butchered and the original logic they couldn't replicate without breaking it further. Byron stared at the screen, then out the window, then back at me. I brought them into the IBM pipeline, he said. They were 2 weeks from closing. Now TechCrunch is implying the platform was a stolen ghost shell. He didn't ask if I'd sabotage them. He didn't need to. I closed the laptop. I'm building something cleaner. From scratch. Transparent, auditable, ethically governed. No shadow functions, no lock triggers. My name on every line. He looked at me for a long moment. What's your ask, 5 million? Convertible note, no interference. I choose the team. Full IP retention. He didn't blink, just nodded once. Send the term sheet by Monday. By the time he stood up, his phone buzzed again. I could see the name Evan, their VP, still trying to spin his way out of the crater. Byron didn't answer. I stayed behind and opened my sketch pad, wrote a new name across the top. Not theirs, mine. This system wouldn't run on silence, it would run on design, on clarity. I turned to a blank page and started mapping the first new logic tree. It felt different, cleaner, like something that didn't need to defend itself in secret. While I drafted the nodes, my phone buzzed again, this time from an email alert. A congressional inquiry had been opened, and somewhere in that mess, my name was now officially part of the investigation. The headline dropped at 9:03 a.m. Startup tied to licensing scandal named in federal tech bid. By 10:00, the Department of Commerce had issued a formal inquiry. The article cited unreleased architecture repurposed from a terminated contributor. They didn't say my name in the opening paragraphs, but by the third update, I was no longer just a whisper. I was a source, then a signature. Someone leaked the pitch deck, same logic tree, same variable labels, same margin notes I used when I first scrawled it onto a whiteboard 2 years ago. They hadn't even changed the font. Just slapped a new title page on it and called it proprietary. I didn't post, I didn't gloat, I just watched the fallout cascade in real time. Harper was the first to go. Her email went wide by noon, effective. Immediately, I am no longer with the company. Comments were turned off. Evan deleted his LinkedIn 2 hours later. The company's main site went dark, replaced by a hosting error and one flickering line. We'll be back soon. They wouldn't. Reddit threads dissected every commit. Someone unearthed an old diagram with my initials still visible in the corner. By evening, I was trending. Not just my work, me. The ghost founder, they called me. The architect they buried. Tara posted a single message on her profile. I wish I asked more questions. It had no likes, no replies, just silence. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I was in my new space by then, bare floors, a clean whiteboard, and a terminal window blinking on a fresh machine. Julian had already connected the founding team, a small cluster of engineers I trusted, because none of them needed to speak loud to be heard. I pulled up the license again. Not the old one, the new one. Transparent, self-expiring, attributed on every build. No buried clauses, no shadows, just a name on the first line of the README file. Mine. I wrote, "This system does not inherit silence. It honors those who built it." And just as I hit Save a Ping, lit up the corner of my screen. The subject line, confirmation required congressional statement on code origin. I met Julian at the cafe on 4th and Broadway, the one with no Wi-Fi and tables made from reclaimed doors. We sat by the window. I brought nothing but my laptop and an idea I hadn't spoken aloud until now. He didn't ask for a pitch, just opened a notebook and wrote 2 words at the top, version 0. I typed while the world spun behind the glass headlines, still unraveling opinion pieces, flooding in former colleagues, scrubbing bios, whispering about NDAs and ghost licenses. None of it touched me now. I'd done what I needed to do. The silence had spoken. I wrote the first line of the new README. This code does not belong to ghosts. It belongs to survivors. Julian leaned over to read. He didn't smile. He nodded. Let's build it, he said. We weren't chasing payback. We weren't weaponizing trust or hiding keys in lockboxes. What we were building had no secrets, no shadow conditions, no clauses waiting to trigger when the power shifted. We'd seen what happened when systems were built on buried ego. This time, there would be no erasure, no ambiguity about ownership. Every decision, every node, every fork in logic would be documented and signed. By the time the press began calling again, asking for interviews, retrospectives, hero arcs, I let the calls go to voicemail. I didn't need to correct the record anymore. The work was speaking louder than any headline. Our team grew by 3 that week, 2 engineers I once mentored, 1 ethics lead Julian had poached from a venture that folded too fast to forget. We weren't trying to scale like wildfire. We were building like roots. Late that evening after the cafe closed, I stayed back alone to finish writing the contribution guide. I named it plainly, Building with Dignity. The last line read, "If you contribute to this, your name stays on it. Always." I closed the file, pushed the commit, and watched the system update. Outside, a kid passed by in a hoodie with a quote printed across the back. It was mine. I didn't flinch. I just closed the lid and walked out into the night.